Supervisor Lind? Here. Supervisor Anderson? Supervisor Long?
Here.
Supervisor Leaf?
Here.
Supervisor Cook? Present. Supervisor Adams?
Present.
Supervisor Burning?
Here.
Supervisor Attino?
Present.
Supervisor Fiedler?
Here.
Supervisor Osnes? Supervisor Counter?
Present.
Supervisor Hanson?
Here.
Supervisor Shirley?
Present.
Supervisor Telejohn?
Present.
Supervisor Carlson? Supervisor Barkalow?
Present.
Supervisor Schwenepool?
Present.
Supervisor Van Sumeren?
Present.
And Supervisor Ramberg.
Present.
Next item of business is approval of our minutes from our Wednesday, April 12th Committee of the Whole. Can we have a motion to approve those minutes? From somebody? Supervisor Long and Supervisor Hanson second. If there's no objection, they're approved. And is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? Hearing no public comment, we'll move to their business items. And again, we're in the Committee of the Whole. Much more relaxed than our normal board meetings, but still kind of follow normal civil order. Mostly this was going to be a meeting where Ken Witt's going to describe our capital improvements program, and we can take motions on things, but ultimately it's just guidance for what will happen later at the board in September and later at the administration committee. So in just a second, when Administrator Witt comes back, we'll call on him to begin the process. Thanks. Oh, okay, thanks. Yep, I will. So Ken, you're up.
I was just working on the video. We should be getting a video feed on that middle one, so Kathy can follow along. She should be able to see the screen, though. You can see the screen, right, Kathy? Yep. For voting, Kathy, just a little logistics for you. You're a thumbs up unless I see a thumbs down. So we'll assume that you approve everything. All right.
Because that's what I do all the time, right?
Yes, yes. You're very.
You'll know how I feel.
Yeah.
Believe me.
All righty. So for everybody else, we have our paddles. It's paddle day. So we have a green thumbs up and a red thumbs down. So it's the direction that it's facing me, not facing you. So, so when we get to a project, we'll ask, sort of a consensus of what you think of this project. It's an easy way instead of, motions and seconds and voting on every item. So just hold the paddle up. I'll take a quick tally around the room, and we'll get that number. And that'll be input that we use then to determine whether the project stays on the list or doesn't stay on the list. It's going to need a majority to continue on. The rest of the process then, so we've developed this at staff level. We've taken it to the different standing committees. We now bring it to the committee of the whole. We're going to get your input as a group today. From here then, what we'll do is we'll take it by resolution to the admin committee, and then I'm projecting the September county board to be voted on as a resolution. And that's when you'll formally vote on it as a package deal. With approval of that resolution, it'll become part of the 2024 budget then. It'll become a supporting document to the 2024 budget. We do that with the library levy and with the capital improvement, just because they're large dollar amounts, a little bit separate from the operating portion of the budget. So we do approve those separately. I did print out, and they're on your desk there, a larger format of the capital improvement plan for 2024 to 2028. It's color-coded, so my color-coding system, here's the key to it, green is go. So these are routine items. They're on there every year. They're recurring. They're really the basic minimum we need to continue to operate the county government. It's maintenance of buildings. It's squad cars. It's things like that. We're going to skip right over top of those. I'm not even going to stop on the green ones. We're just going to go past them. Unless you have a question on them, I'd be happy to stop and answer that question. So as we're going through them, if you have a question, just let me know. The yellow ones, those are slow down. So those ones are projects that are going to be funded in 2024. I just want to make sure that you understand, if this project stays on the list, we will actually spend money next year on that project. So just slow down a little bit on that, because we are spending money on that project line item. The red ones then are stop. Those are brand-new projects. You have not seen those projects before. So I want to make sure that we do come to a full stop on those. You fully understand what that project is, so that we can go over those projects in some detail. Supervisor Leaf, you had a question?
You might be getting to this, but is there anything related to the budget that was just passed at the state level that would impact our decisions here today?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Supervisor Shirley.
Just a quick question. You have 3 of them in facilities that are marked, the numbers marked in red?
Yep.
Those mean something different?
They do, yeah. So the red numbers are things that came up at committee. There were questions at committee on those items. So I do want to go over those because we may want to alter those dollar amounts or line items for those projects. They were questioned at committee. We didn't necessarily have the full answer when it was at committee. So I do want to go over those. And then the rest of them that are in not colored, that are in white, are out-year projects. They've been on the list before. They're not brand new. You've seen them before, and they're not being funded in 2024. They're just remaining on the list. So not that you can't still take action on those. By all means, if there's a project on there that you don't want to do, you should tell me, because we do invest staff time and resources in planning for these projects. So if we're never going to do it, you should let me know so we don't spend any more staff time researching it. So that's the color coding, and that's the process that we're going to use today. So any questions on process? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck, and we're going to start going through some projects. All right. And then Chuck and I will alternate back and forth on the projects, and Chuck's going to start us with facilities. You want to jump right to 10051.
Right. Project 10051, parking lot patch and seal. Any questions?
Which parking lot is that for?
Service center. This year we did the roofing, next year gonna do the parking lot.
Chuck, would you like a show of paddles after each item?
Yep.
Just go ahead and raise your paddle when you're ready for that vote, Chuck. That'll signal to them.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, on to the next one. 10085, generator replacement, that's in fiscal year 27. Replacement generator for the service center. Any questions?
How do we know we're going to need a generator in, is it just a scheduled replacement, or is that something that can be, do extended maintenance on and get another 2 years out of it?
So that generator at the service center currently does not run the whole building. So that's up to you guys if you want the whole building under generator. That will be 25 years old at that time. We don't have issues with that generator. We could push it off, but it just depends on if that building should be fully generated or not.
So it wouldn't make sense to buy a supplemental generator to hit the rest of the building, just it needs another generator?
We could, but I think,
Right. See, your robust recommendation is buy another generator.
right,
Okay.
replace the one that's there.
I'm in.
Any other questions? Let's vote. Okay, on to the next one. 10095. 220,000 in fiscal year 27. New parking lot for D&D building. Be replaced in New Richmond.
What's the D&D building?
What's the D&D building?
You want me
Go
to
ahead.
answer that?
Yeah.
DD building is up in Richmond, it's, Death and Drugs, where Patty, medical examiner, and the sheriff's office is located.
I take it that this is a different area of the parking lot or than number 51 chip seal?
Correct. Yep, correct, this is a different area.
Was that redone that when we built the health center?
No.
Right.
Next one, 10106, funded this year, $370,000 for upgrade for the government center elevators.
That's a duplicate, that'll be on the government center expansion, so that one can actually be removed.
Okay, let's vote.
I was going to say, just to clarify, when we raise the green paddle this time is to approve the recommendation to drop it, so.
Okay, next one. 10107, $400,000 for 25, fiscal year 25. Solar array Baldwin Egg Center.
Regarding this particular project, I know we've discussed this in the past, but I'd like to be reminded of what our return on investment is. And secondly, we're using cash to pay for this up front, and we're not looking at borrowing for this, correct?
It'd be a 15-year buyback, and I believe it'd be cash. Yeah, cash.
So would we be better off, since we have such a long return on investment, would we be better off borrowing the money on that instead, rather than use cash for maybe some more immediate needs that we have? Because we have a lot of immediate needs.
Yeah, when we get to the end, I'm going to talk about the funding sources and cycle. So in 25 and 27, I am anticipating bonding. So at 400,000, that's a relatively small project. We can cash flow that if you want to. If you want to roll that into a bond that we're doing other projects for, like the highway shop is going to in that year, then we can roll it into that. So we have some options, but at 400,000, I would probably just use cash. But there is the option to look at your idea, Paul. Chair Long.
You said there's a 15-year buyback on the, return on investment.
ROI.
Yes. What happens after 15 years? Are they still functioning? Do they have to be replaced? At what point do they need to be replaced, and what kind of cost is that going to be? So I'm just concerned we just get to that point where we finally break even, and then we have to replace them.
So Taylor was saying that 30 years is the estimated life on the solar panels. So yeah, they would have to be replaced. So a couple of things on that is, so you have an upfront capital cost. Capital cost, whether you do it through a bond issue or whether you use cash, Doesn't affect our operating budget. What it does then is it reduces the energy consumption, which is in our operating budget, which frees that cash every year for something else. It'll take about 15 years to recoup the $400,000, and then we just have continued savings past that until they need to be replaced. The other thing that we're looking at is there's some new federal tax credits that they're going to make eligible for government agencies, which might actually be able to reduce that 15-year return on investment even lower. So that's the one thing that we're really watching, and part of the reason why we have it in an out year rather than maybe an immediate year. Yep.
I was going to say, thank you, Supervisor, but why don't we just direct our questions directly to Ken? You don't have to go through me. That'd be fine.
Where is the location of this solar farm?
It's going to be on the lawn at the Ag Center. I don't remember which side of the building. Wherever there's a grassy spot, south side of the building. Yeah. Van Summeren?
One other thing, if this goes through, we should plan for is there's upkeep on this, there's maintenance, and inverters are the target for every strike of lightning in the world. And so expect to have some cost in it. Lightning strikes are not covered by warranties, and even the warranties on inverters are rather short. So we're going to have to plan in the coming years, if this goes through, that we have some maintenance money.
Lightning strikes are covered under our insurance because the highway's been hit, 5 times, Robbie? So we have a $25,000 deductible on those lightning strikes, though, but yes.
Yeah. Hopefully they won't cost $25,000, but maybe. You know, if Robbie doesn't get his hands in the money first. We'll.
Yeah, right. Supervisor Ortino, did you still have a question?
Thank you. I was wondering, there was talk a while ago about even the possible sale of the building, quite a few years ago. And how much presence does the county have in the building? Because I thought we leased a lot of that out.
Yeah, so we had looked at selling that building. I have the file on it, 2011, 12. There's only a couple supervisors, probably only Supervisor Hanson here that might remember that. So we had looked at it at that time. The county board decided to retain it. We do have a long-term lease with the USDA in that building. They consume about half of the first floor. The other part of the building, we house UW Extension in. We have about a half a dozen staff that we house in that building, and then some space downstairs that we use for different events and storage and such. I think we can vote on that one then.
All right. Okay, on to the next one, 10108, $130,000 in fiscal year 27. Replace Government Center West driveway, the western part of the lower parking lot. Any question? Go ahead.
Is this something that isn't covered under the remodel we're currently under?
No, this is the back loop around the jail headed towards the current sheriff's and jail parking lot.
Are we going to do these, is this the, let me look. Okay, so we're doing the parking lot here. Are we going to get a better deal because we're replacing multiple parking lots that year? Are you going to have one contractor do, in other words, are you going to get a better deal because we're doing multiple, leverage your purchasing? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure with that. The other, I don't think we're replacing any of the other parking lots.
I thought we're doing.
Oh, the DD building. Yeah, we'd put it in with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well. That's the same as if the jail expansion went through. That would be part of it too, of rerouting it around the jail expansion.
Next one, 10109. $55,000 in 24 and $80,000 in 27, landscaping for the nursing home. Land architecture design and include irrigation of the building. Finish the irrigation around the building that was not finished in 2023. Go ahead.
Could you scroll down on the screen? Because I'm only at the solar array. I'm hearing what you're saying, but thank you.
Go ahead.
Just a question, we have a split. Part of this is in 24, part in 27. What portion are we talking about irrigating now versus in 27?
We'd start with the front of the nursing home, and then in 27, we would do towards the, all the way around.
Have you designed this so that it requires as little maintenance as possible? So we're not, have you thought about doing this in a way so that we're not, we're cutting less grass, we're fertilizing less, and we're spending less time maintaining the property itself, so that it still looks nice, but it's easier to take care of? Is that part of your program?
We're not looking to reduce the yard up there. I don't know if that's what you're asking, or...
That is exactly what I'm asking. Are you, I mean, putting in easier to maintain landscaping, so that we have less staff time and less water and less fertilizer going into it, more sustainable. And sustainable, I'm not using that word as a politically loaded word, I'm just using it as financially, something that costs less to take care of, and you see
all the shrubs and trees and stuff that we put in as things that come back every
right, shrubs and
year,
trees are easier
so-
to take care of than grass.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where I'm going with that. Is that what you're designing, or?
Well,
I'm just
we're
curious.
designing irrigation to irrigate the lawn that's currently up there.
Okay.
No, all right.
Chuck, we have a question.
Go ahead.
So I know that, $55,000 in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot of money, but do we really need to irrigate? I mean, as, Supervisor Hanson was inferring, maybe we should be looking at other ways of landscaping so that we don't have to irrigate and it's much more sustainable and easier to take care of. So I know it's not a lot of money, but do we really need to irrigate? Do we really need this?
Well, on a year like this year, where it's been a drought, there's been a lot of plants that have died. We'll have to replace them if we want that building to look as nice as it does now. So we're gonna start with, irrigating the beds, flower beds, and as for the lawn, that's if you want it to look nice and green or burnt.
Well, I like my lawn to look nice too, but, I have to water all the time. So if it goes dormant, maybe it doesn't look quite as nice. But again, the question is it really necessary? Because the lawn goes dormant, it comes back when you get some rain. I guess I'm having a little problem with spending money on these types of projects when we have a lot of other needs.
So where I was going with it is if we're going to spend some money, maybe we should come up with something that's going to be more drought resistant, because we've had so many very hot summers. And we're talking about, with the total maximum daily load for phosphorus in the river, Lake St. Croix, which is one of our largest industries, is tourism. I question whether we should be maintaining a green lawn on any of our campuses, and that's something that I've been meaning to take up. So at this moment in time, this might be a good place to start. I think perhaps we should just take this off, talk about reworking the landscaping in general, and we could come up with a policy and talk to facilities through our administrative committee. We'll bring that up in another moment at another meeting. But rethink how we landscape so that we use less water, so we don't use fertilizer, and we let things go dormant in a way that's still attractive. So that it's not necessarily going to cost less money up front, but over the long haul, it'll be more drought resistant, still look good. Maybe we'll water flower beds and have some flowers that look nice up along the building. But I think, in my opinion, at this moment, I'd take this off, ask them to retool this, talk to an landscape architect, and come up with a plan that's not your conventional green lawn with succulent flowers and shrubs that require a lot of water. That's my thought.
My thought is, if we have 55,000 in for this next fiscal year, that's going to do the front. If we could reduce that number so we're just looking at the flower beds and not everything else, that would make more sense to me. I think that if we go to a landscape architect, sorry, Dan, and ask them to do something like that, we'll probably get something in the ballpark of 100 to 150,000 to redo everything that we have there already, rather than just sprinkle the flower beds so that the staff don't have to water them every day.
I agree. I think that makes sense. Let's just spend whatever money it takes to keep the shrubs alive and the flower beds alive. I'm not certain if watering lawn is a prudent use of water, of our resources. I agree with dumping fertilizer in every storm sewer that runs to a different place. But I think if we keep the 4 feet around the building, or 6 feet, whatever it is, nice and bright and flowery, that would make a lot more sense. So maybe we should look at spending the 55,000 and remove that 80,000 in 2027, 8, whatever it is.
So I'm hearing some consensus maybe on just watering the flower bed portion of that. Do you know, Taylor, how that would change the scope of the project? The 55 and the 80, what it would be if we want to do the whole building but just the flower bed side of it?
No, I'd have
Okay. All right.
to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're hearing you though, so we will. I guess when we consider the 55,000, what we'll be considering is under the scope that you're telling us right now, just the flower beds, not the lawn. I like you more and more every day, Supervisor Otino.
You're really draining.
All right, so we can vote on that as a reduced scope.
Okay, can you clarify what we're voting on, please?
So we are voting on, well, maybe what you want to do is pull the 80 off and leave the 55 on, but we're going to use the 55 to sprinkle the, just the flower bed side, not the lawn.
I agree with that, but I'd ask that we take a look at some alternate to the lawn concept later on, so that we just don't have a dormant brown conventional green lawn that's just brown in the future. Something that's drought resistant. We're not voting to do that, but I just ask that we keep that in mind and consider it in the future.
Next one is 10110. Government Center solar panels. Solar panel project for Government Center in 2026 engineering and 2027 construction.
Are we not doing this one first because of the project that's going on?
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is this the same solar array that we were talking about as part of the Government Center project that cost too much that we put off?
Yes.
Okay.
So, if I could jump on top of Supervisor Shirley's question. So, if we end up with enough funds on the government center project, the $80 million project, this could be something that we could pull back into the project and would just come off the KIP at that time. So, because that was one of the original projects listed on it, one of the alternates.
And again, I think we talked about it before, but what's the ROI on this one?
We've been looking at about 15 years on them, getting them down as low as 5 potentially with, if the federal tax credits kick in as high as they potentially could.
And will the federal money, are they saying it'll be retroactive? Are we thinking?
It's not retroactive.
So if we build this before that money comes, will we be out of it?
Yeah, if you spent it before the tax credits are eligible, you wouldn't get it retroactive. So they're looking at implementing those this fall, though. I watched a webinar on it just within the past month. So, federal government's working on it. Just stay tuned.
Yeah, I just have a
Supervisor
comment.
Patino.
We spent over $80 million on this addition. And if this becomes part of that, there's extra money left over, I'm fine with it. But if you're going to ask me to support another $750,000 on top of that, I say absolutely not.
Yeah. What
Thank
if
you.
I could tell you you could make that money back in energy savings within 5 years?
You got to prove it to me.
Yep, got it.
Ken, Chuck, maybe for the items 10118 and 10121, they're big ticket items, and maybe Ken could describe why we're putting them in the red ink now to be probably deleted. I think we can combine them, they deal with the same type of thing.
Right, so it's the 2 sprinklers, the DD building in year 27, and project 121 is the $500,000 for the Ag Center sprinkler system. So after our highway shop fire, is it 2 years ago now? It seems like a long time ago. We added sprinkler systems to all the buildings, sort of as a reaction that we had a fire there. It came up at committee, though. The question was asked, well, how does our insurance premiums change if we sprinkle those buildings? Which made me stop and think, well, I don't change at all. We pay the exact same premium whether the building's sprinklered or not sprinklered. And then I thought, well, what's the difference on our deductible, whether it's sprinklered or it burns down? Well, it's the same $25,000 deductible. It doesn't cost us anything different. Is there anything mission critical there that if the building burns down, we're out of operation? And not really. The offices that are there, we could have up and running within a day with alternate equipment. You're going to lose the files that are in that building, but you're going to lose them whether they burn or whether they're water damaged. And so, I don't know, it really made me think about whether it's worthwhile to sprinkle those buildings or not. And I guess I'm of the opinion now, after giving it some second thought, that maybe not. Supervisor Anderson?
So I know there's like building code, and this is probably an obvious question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, that a certain size of building needs a sprinkler system, and I'm assuming this is under that.
Yeah, if you built it brand new right now, you'd probably have to sprinkle it, but because they're existing buildings, you do not have to retrofit them.
Okay.
So the motion we would have then would be for 10118 and 10121 to delete them from the 24 and 27 budgets. So if we raise the green paddle, then we're voting to delete those 2 per the administrator's recommendation.
All right. We just saved you another $860,000.
Okay. 10119, nursing home hot water plant replacement. Place the hot water plant at the nursing home.
So
this
what's
is-
the,
this is,
what's the age of the unit that's
Right.
there and what's going on with it for
These
the need
units
for
were put in
replacement?
with the new building. So they're 7 years old. They're hot water heaters, and we've had a lot of issues with them in the past 3 years. So we've spent a lot of dollars to get these up and running.
These aren't like residential hot water heaters, these
No,
are commercial hot water
they're
heaters.
commercial.
How is it they only lasted 7 years?
Good question. I don't have the answer.
That's disturbing.
Are we taking precautions on the building for filtration? Because I know that you're talking about the New Richmond.
Yep.
They got high lime and then part of the operations with, during certain times of years, they have a high demand on their water systems on that north end. Are they getting sand contamination, or what's been the issue that's causing it? And is there ways that we can invest in pre-equipment to try to protect them so we don't have these kind of costs?
It's not with the water. Our water is filtered and it's also softened. It's with the burners themselves on the units.
I guess a concern, if we're going to put this kind of investment into it for the future, that we really look at the type of equipment we purchase the next go-around so that we don't have these kind of expenses, because that seems like an awful short life for that kind of equipment.
Yep, I'd talk to the manufacturer, and if they say, oh, this is great equipment, and tell them to ask them what kind of length they can, what's the expected lifespan of this equipment. They tell you it's gonna be, oh, you can get 10 years out of this, and put it in writing.
Okay.
Hold them to it.
Yep.
And be tough. Yeah, and then that's, but the other thing is, we've got geothermal, and my question was, is you're sure that this has got nothing to do with the water? Because if the water quality is threatening the water heaters, are we at any risk with our geothermal system out there?
We've had no issues with the geothermal. That is a glycol-based system, separate than the water system.
Also, we have to keep in mind that when the water heaters were put in, they were put in on the lowest bid when the building was built.
I believe Supervisor Leaf has a question. No?
Yep, I was just going to reiterate the whole thing that others have said about warranties, and just we expect better than 7 years.
And my point is entertaining extended warranties on these types of things, and how much are they and all that jazz.
Yep.
Are they gonna make it to 27?
Yes, after the fixes we've done in the last 2 years, they should make it to 27.
What have we spent in the last couple of years trying to get them through?
I don't know that number off the top of my head, but it's a large amount.
Any other questions? Yep. Yep. Next one, 10120. Nursing home grease trap. To install a grease trap for the kitchen at the nursing home in New Richmond. And they don't have one at this time, so they're just maintaining it. So. No questions? See if the next one does that. Okay, next two items are new this year. $1.6 million in fiscal year 2025 for the Government Center Jail new roof on the 1993 roof. Current roof is from 1999. 2023 facilities has had to patch 3 holes in the roof. The roof rubber membrane is starting to get brittle and crack.
I guess my question is, how does this affect, I know we'll be doing a jail, potentially a jail expansion there. How does that affect what we're going to be doing as we tie those buildings in?
Shouldn't affect that building at all. That would be separated from this building.
Are you considering doing the white PVC so we can save energy in that building?
It's, something we're considering. We've gone black for the roofs up in Richmond for the heat, but that's something we'll look at.
Well, have you looked at the numbers and seen if it's, I'm just wondering if you've costed it out, seen if it's cost effective and compared that to the energy savings?
No.
Okay. If you would, please.
Yeah, we'll look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah.
If I could jump in on the next item, that's the jail wire mesh screening. We've talked about that at the Public Protection Committee meeting, and the sheriff described the need for that. We have the chief deputy with us. Perhaps he could also talk about it. Also, we're going to be having our annual jail inspection with members of the PPJ on August 3rd. And at least my tentative recommendation is that we not act on this item at this meeting, that we have our jail inspection. We see it in person with a number of the supervisors looking at what this would actually entail, and we come back to the administration committee meeting or PPJ meeting as appropriate in time to resolve this, in time for the next action by the entire board of supervisors. But perhaps the chief deputy could describe why we need this and why it has a $750,000 cost. Or I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't see the sheriff behind Sheriff Knudsen. If you, why don't you come on up? Sorry about that.
He said he'll sit sideways next time. And I had shown several, well, it's probably been a year ago now, the need for that. There were several instances where 2 inmates on separate occasions had tried to tie off a sheet and crawl underneath that railing and hang themselves from the second tier. Our concern has always been that if there was a fight or a disturbance on the second tier, that somebody would end up going over. We've been very fortunate that nothing like that has happened, but there's always that possibility, and we'd like to eliminate that or mitigate that as best we can by putting that screening up there. Originally, that price we were thinking that wouldn't be that where we're at right now, but it has come into just below a little bit between 600,000 and 700,000. Part of that cost is probably 2 weeks for each day room. We have the 4 day rooms. Also included in that is removing the carpet and polishing the concrete for maintenance reasons. That is, many of the jails now that are being built don't have any carpet in there just because of how bad it gets. So we'd like to include that into this process, but mainly that this is for that jail screening on that second tier.
Well, when you say jail screening, are you talking about, is this a plexiglass screening or if it's some other type of screening, does it have any obstructions towards, for visualization with monitoring systems or any of that?
You know, there's different types of screening, and it's, I don't want to use the word chicken wire, but it's, I guess that's the best way to, or a chain link fence. However, the strength, one of the other costs involved in that is we have to run it all the way to the ceiling. And then we also have to do the stairwell coming down. And it's very similar to what we have in the special needs wing right now, all the way to the ceiling and then on the stairwell. And as far as any sight lines, no. That's part of that design and where we place the cameras. And going all the way to the ceiling, we have to also make sure that the sprinkler heads aren't impacted and that there's some on both sides, so.
So the question before us really was, we can raise our paddles now to support it or oppose it, or we can defer action on this until the jail inspection has occurred and a number of the supervisors have had a chance to look at precisely what the sheriff has just described, and then come back to us at a later time within 2 months to have a final decision on it. So just very tentatively, maybe we could raise our green paddles for those who'd like to postpone action at this time, and if we don't want to postpone it, we can act on it. But for those who want to postpone action until after the jail inspection, please raise your green paddle.
So what postpone means is I'm leaving it on the list, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Sheriff.
All right.
$10116, $15,000 in fiscal year 27, nursing home stage conversion of hallway carpeting to LVT plank flooring.
Did we get an opinion from the administrator on the change from the carpeting to the vinyl flooring? Ken, do we have an opinion from the nursing home administrator on that change of material?
Yeah, I've talked to her about it.
Is she on board?
On certain areas. So, this is the area I believe that this is by the kitchen area. Which would be then a lot easier to clean.
So this doesn't affect the aesthetic of the building?
No.
Going from carpet to vinyl?
No.
Okay.
Will there be any impact with that for the switch? Because carpet is also used for sound attenuation. Is there going to be any issue with that where it degrades the ability to keep the noise down?
The LVT is almost like a rubber, and it is very quiet. We've noticed in the jail that it's very quiet too, so sound-wise it should be good.
I'm going to pass this off to Ken.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Taylor.
All right, we're going to move on to IT now. So we got the recurring project, copy machines, and then a new project out in the year 2028, $200,000 for county data storage replacement. So this comes up on a cycle, a longer term cycle, but eventually that hardware needs to be replaced. I remember going into Best Buy, must have been in the early 1990s one time. It was the first time I saw a gigabyte And I asked the sales clerk there, I go, what's a gigabyte? He says, well, a gigabyte is enough data storage. It'll hold all the software that's in this store. It's all the more you would ever need. So you're getting a gigabyte of storage? All right, it might be. We're going to get a few gigabytes. All right. So 200,000 might get you several gigabytes, but that's what it is. It's replacement of storage. Yeah.
And is there also upgrades, I would imagine, to the evil folks out there that try to tap in and lock our data or steal our data, or ransomware, all that stuff?
Yeah, we're doing that stuff all the time. I don't believe this project involves that. This is just a hardware project.
It is, yeah. We have two primary data storage systems. We keep one in a location near Hudson, and we keep one in a location near New Richmond, and we replicate data to prevent kind of what you're talking about. Plus, we have other layers that I don't want to talk about publicly.
John, could you use the microphone?
Yep, that protect our data. But this is mainly, the last time we replaced those two storage systems, one was 2019, one was 2020. Once they get 7-8 years, the manufacturer stops supporting them except for critical security updates. So we need to replace those on a rolling schedule. And it's not something that I want to budget $50,000 a year for 10 years to do, because I can't buy any one system with just $50,000. So we do it in big chunks like this.
All right, data storage replacement. Thank you. All right, on to page 2. All right, so out in year 2028, we're looking at replacing the cameras that we have both throughout the jail and the health center. Really, those will be reaching their end of their life expectancy at that point. So it's a big project. There's probably more in the jail than there is at the healthcare campus, but we're going to do both facilities at the same time as one project. Any questions on camera replacement? I've not seen any. Replacing cameras.
Ken, I may have missed it, but we also may have missed 170. I don't think there was any objections to that. Nobody raised any issues about it, but and if anybody had any issues, I don't think we specifically discussed that, so we'll accept that unless there's any discussion further on that.
The green ones I just go right past.
Right, okay.
So, if you have questions on them, though, please do stop. All right, so the next project then on the list is the Hudson Highway facility replacement. So this was originally, I think, about $3 million or $3.5 million last year. It's doubled in size. Based upon the Transportation Committee's input, they would actually like to see this go up to $7.4 million because there's different alternatives. As that project's getting closer now in 2025, they're looking at some different alternatives. So when we were looking at, the $3 million range, we were looking at an addition onto the existing building. Looking longer term, though, what's going to last us, 30, 40, 50 years out into the future, they really said, turn the old building into a cold storage. We have enough land there, build a whole new structure independent of it. And so that's why the project ends up doubling, because you're rebuilding what you have and building onto the addition into the future. This is our highest population center, though, on this side of the county. And so we really do need a larger satellite here than we do at Deer Park or up in Somerset or some of our other satellite locations. So this one is larger than the other ones, but it allows us to stage the vehicles closer to the population centers, get the material out on the roads faster, get those roads plowed faster, hold more equipment here to accommodate that. The change from the $6.8 million to the $7.4 million really was encompassing an external car wash system, truck wash, so that the trucks can be washed. It's something that we did at the new facility in Baldwin, which is a lot better. It's basically an automated truck wash where you can drive the trucks through that rather than hand washing them, which does pose a lot of risk to the drivers. So building that here saves the time and efficiency rather than driving to Baldwin to wash your truck and then driving it back to Hudson to park it. I mean, you're going to save an entire hour of labor every time one of those trucks need to be cleaned out. Yeah, that's one of the questions too. Supervisor Leaf, you had a question?
Yeah, so I would also say, in addition to the hours of cleaning it, I think it extends the life of the equipment too, because we're not getting the wear, you're getting all that gunk off. I think we've proven that with the Baldwin facility.
So really on this one, we're looking at probably increasing this to 7.4 million so we can incorporate that highest potential cost for the project. We're looking at fiscal year 2025. When I get to the end, I'll go over in a little bit more detail. This one obviously is too big. I will not cash flow this one. This one would require bonding, and that's part of the reason why we've picked the year 25. But 3/4 vote to bond, so we need 15 votes in order to bond a project of this size. So a little bit different on this. But are there questions on the project first before we vote? Supervisor Counter?
And just to familiarize, where's the location of this?
Yeah, it's on Highway 12, just off of, what's the intersection there?
Exit 4.
Yeah, exit 4, but yeah. It's right on Highway 12. It's where we have our recycling event every year. If you've ever gone to that, you've been to that's in Highway Shop.
Then with that, do they have the ability there for as far as the treatment of so I know that was a concern in Baldwin for the treatment of the brine that comes off the vehicles and stuff for pre-treatment?
One of the challenges with this facility is it's on a private on-site, so these would be tanks, and part of the expense, the increased expenses encompassing that gray water we'd have to deal with.
We're going to store the plows indoors then too?
Yes, that would be one of the biggest benefits is right now we are storing our plows outside at the Hudson facility. So, yep, they would be able to be stored inside, similar to what we did in Baldwin.
So all the same arguments, we're going to cut back on workman's comp claims, and we're going to have that type of advantage.
You can basically take 30 minutes off a response issue for us, just hooking and unhooking.
And just to clarify, this was a recommendation from the Transportation Committee, correct?
Correct, yes. Yeah, it was unanimously recommended to go with the option 6, I think it was, 6 or 7. But that one carried the price tag of $7.4 million. So. Vice President?
How long would we be looking at carrying the note on this?
20 years.
20 years? And what would the impact be to the taxpayers, the overall per year based on today's interest rates? Like what?
Yeah.
Not per household, not per capita, not per mill rate. I'm talking like what is the actual to the entire county each year? Would you get that to me?
Yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head. I'd have
Yep,
to
that's fine.
do some math.
Okay, thank you.
And being that more rural area rather than in a city with city sewer and water, is the sewer part of that brine concept that maybe was part of the difficulty in the past?
We'd look at it when we get to building. When we looked at it in Baldwin, the payback wasn't there, so we took it out. We would have to evaluate it for this facility as well, being that it's a separate holding tank. So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head if the ROI is there at this facility.
Are we talking about solar panels out there too?
Yeah, we haven't looked at that. You want me to add that on?
Can we do a 5-minute break? 5-minute break.
Supervisor Shirley.
So if we're looking at this in 25, then what we're actually saying is that we're going to move ahead with design costs in 24 and construction in 25?
No, we don't hire the architect until 25 then. Construction probably, it's probably a 2-year project when it's all said and done. So really, construction will complete in '26 sometime, I would anticipate.
So when would we vote for the bond then, in '24, late '24?
No, '25. So I don't want to go out and hire an architect until I know that the county board has approved the bonding for it, because I don't want to end up spending money that I don't have a resource for. So until the county board has approved bonding, we won't proceed with a project that's a bonded project.
So my question, Ken, to you, your earlier comment that we needed more of a majority to vote, we're actually not voting on the bond, we're voting on the concept of the plans. Do we need that right now at this point?
Yeah, so my only point on that is if this one came in as a 50-50 split on whether we should do this project, well, I know I'm not going to get the bonding on it then because no one's going to support it. So really, I'm just telling you that a simple majority isn't enough to keep a project like this moving forward. I really need to see more support than that. And I think there will be on this project. It's just that I want you to understand that the project doesn't happen without a bonding. The project doesn't happen without three-quarter support of the county board.
Ready for the panels?
Nope, Robbie wants to say something.
Could I add one thing? Part of the reason this footprint got expanded as well, our Baldwin facility right now has about 3 to 4 open spots in the parking facility. This would actually, we would relocate 2 to 3 trucks from Baldwin to here, so it actually helps us in both locations. It extends the life in Baldwin, it buys us a little more space as well as it puts the resources where we need the resources. Right now, we're just working it out of Baldwin because that's where we have the space. So there's some efficiencies we gain as well as reduced costs of service. So.
Seeing no further questions, panels?
Thank you.
The next item is HHS, and it's a green. If there's no comment on that, we'll adopt that. But then we'll take a 10-minute break. Let's reconvene at 9:45. What happened?
So break.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
If we could top off our coffee and return to our seats, that would be great. All right. Committee of the Whole will reconvene, and the next items up will deal with law enforcement. No, well, no, but we'll go to corrections.
Do we want to go through the ones in green?
No.
Do not? Okay. All right. Project 10100, $115,000 for jail appliances, placing on industrial washing machines and 2 industrial dryers due to end of life expectancy. Current expectancy cost per facility is approximately $50,000 in new jail pod. No questions? Yeah.
The jail pod's the next.
It's a new jail pod, an iPod, yeah. Yeah, that'd be really expensive. Okay, the next item is project 10124. $30 million in fiscal year 27 for the new jail pod.
I think it might be good for someone to explain the relative need here.
Well, as we looked at some projections of current numbers and statistics, this morning, our jail population this morning is 131. That has creeped up. And we were at a high of 150 right before COVID. We dipped back down because of some different things, COVID specific and different bonds. We got back to between 60, 70, 80 during that time, but we're back up to 131 again. The pod itself, when we talk about a new pod, it's really an expansion of the jail to include enhancing, enforcing medical facilities, more kind of like a medical unit for housing, the special needs cells, continuing those we had put in several years ago. They're remain full, as do our receiving cells. So this is really just an overview, actually an expansion, not only with the pod, but remodeling and adding more receiving cells as well. When the building was built in '93, they had 3 receiving cells, and again, still have just those 3 receiving cells. That's for anybody that comes in. And those have been used for those with alcohol, medical, drug. So this is really just expands that portion as well. So it's not just a new pod itself. And the higher our numbers get, we're housing people in Huber dorms, our old Huber dorms. So for us, it makes it very difficult for separation when it comes to no contacts. We only have certain limited areas for no contacts. Classifications. We don't want the person that's classified, that just came in on suspected of a homicide, to be in with the same 18-year-old in on his traffic warrant, waiting to see the judge next day. So we have to classify people as well. These larger pods that house, in our current facility, there's 24 in one day room, 24 in another day room. the new jails are coming with 4 and 8 day rooms that really help out when it comes to that separation classification. So again, as our population increases, it makes it more difficult to separate and to really, even within the walls, hold people accountable. Lockdown, we only have certain areas for lockdown. We only have certain cells that we can utilize lockdown for. So this really allows us to, we're in a reaction mode to the high population, which again, COVID knocked it back, but I truly believe if that wouldn't have happened, we'd be really busting at the seams right now.
Can I ask what our the current capacity is, and then what would the new pod capacity add?
Our current capacity is 184. And that was 184, 185. That was with that addition of the 9 special needs cells. So before we were in the 170s, but we don't want capacity. The state doesn't allow us to get to capacity. So that means we have nowhere to put people coming in.
There's danger in having capacity. It's not safe to be at capacity, is that right?
It's not safe to be at capacity, and even when we look at these numbers, 131, you know, when I talk about that day room of 24 people, that's 1 TV. That's the noise, and it is, you can feel the tension the more full we get. And that's unsafe for the inmates, it's unsafe for the staff. But yeah, when you put that many people in, we have more fights. It's been relatively decent lately, but prior to COVID, we were having a lot of fights just because people, they're on top of each other.
Didn't we have a deputy lose his career due to injury not terribly long ago because of population?
We've had 3. We've had 3 over the last 15 years that have lost their careers to injuries because of fights with inmates and trying to move people and control.
Supervisor Bernie.
Have we looked at the surrounding counties and what their capacity is? And then also, with that being said, if we couldn't utilize other facilities, and I realize that there's travel time and other circumstances, but then on the flip side, if we build this and other counties are in need of more capacity, have we looked at, like in years past, we had our facility used for other counties to bring overflow or when they're at capacity? Have we looked at what the possibility is in partnering with that?
Housing outside really just keeps moving the ball down the road. When we used to house back in the 90s and early 2000s, those places have all built, all have new jails now. Pierce, Polk, done, but they're kind of working towards their capacities as well. You know, a lot of those facilities are 25 years old now, also 25 years old. There is talk, we had to talk with the jail inspector when he came through last week of, you know, when is the time for a regional, say a female facility? Because that's very difficult to have so many females on staff for staffing requirements. There are talks of that, but I don't know if we're at that just because of how busy we are.
To follow up to that, it's kind of like when we were talking about getting the MRI machine or whatever it was for the medical examiner. I mean, that's a way for us to offset a very large expense for us. At the same time, fill a need potentially for our neighbors by doing some sort of consortium with neighboring counties and building this facility not just to be for us, but to help any overflow that happens there. Call it a win-win. I don't know what cliche you'd want to call it, but I think that should be thought about when we're looking at this, because that's $30 million is is a handsome amount of money, so.
Yeah, I mean, currently we're housing certain state inmates as well, to and from the boot camp, and, we've been, they've inquired for certain other holds for like U.S. Marshals, stuff like that. But oftentimes when we take those on, the medical becomes our issue as well. So then the taxpayers are paying for medical issues. So we weigh out when we bring in contracted from others as well, so.
Supervisor Van Summeren.
Yeah, refresh my memory, when are we rebuilding the jail? When is that scheduled for updating? I mean, we're looking here at 2027, realistically it'll be 2028. When are we planning the rebuild?
Yeah, you got it. So we would start the project in 2027, and it would open in 28 or maybe even early 29, depending on the construction time frame for a project that size.
Okay, so is this the jail addition that we've been talking about after
Yes.
the? Oh, okay, excuse me. I thought this was, we're gonna put this Band-Aid on and then we're gonna.
No, this is the big
tear that
addition
down.
that will carry us for the next 20-plus years.
Okay, thank you.
It's just a follow-up question. How much additional capacity would be added in the new pod?
We would look for probably another 100, 120, I think we're kind of looking at.
So going from 180 to about 300.
Yeah.
What's the projected growth of St. Croix County for the next 25 years, and does that match the growth for the same period of time?
I'd have to go back and look at it, but the point is that, yes, it's all population driven. So as our population goes up, so does the inmate count. It's really, you can look at every county across the state and do that ratio. It's probably all within the same bandwidth of population to jail population. So as our population grows, we have to provide more capacity. Supervisor Burning kind of hit on it, we'll go out of county. So the problem with going out of county with your jail population, not only is it the transport every time they have a court appearance, but the costs involved. So that becomes an operating cost then that you're paying to another jail, whereas capital costs have no cost to us. And once we've paid for the bond issue, which is outside the levy limits, there's no cost to it. An operating cost, though, hits our operating budget, which is subject to the levy limit, so it has a bigger impact. Yes.
So, but with the capital expansion, there will be operating costs that will be necessary to operate that capital.
Absolutely.
What we built out.
Yes.
So we're still going to have operating costs on top of the 30 million one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, when this expansion happens, we're going to need more deputies in the jail. We're going to need more resources. So yes, all of your operating costs go up with this, but that's a growing county. I mean, those are the problems that you have.
The comment I just made, so that is exactly why I was asking if we can explore if other counties are in need of more facility, because then we can take in some of that revenue to offset the cost of this, including the operating costs, and maybe help Polk County or Dunn or any of them save money on having their needing to do a 20 or 15 or $30 million build out themselves.
Yep. Yeah, I think we absolutely would. I think we have in the past before. They're going to be under the same scenario, though, where they want to get out of that operating expense also and build their own facility. So it may be short term, but I would never build a jail banking on other counties bringing inmates in. So.
And I'm certainly not asking for that.
Correct.
Just asking for the exploration of what is out there right now.
Yep.
Is there any more discussion on this item?
Supervisor Leaf had a question a moment ago.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, I was just gonna, Supervisor Burning beat me to it in terms of the operating cost, but how many more staff would we need to service this new pod? Just a rough estimate.
It takes 4 deputies to fill a shift, so 4 equals 1 per shift. So it's a matter of that 1, 2, or 3?
I think two more
Two.
per shift.
Okay, I was just asking, and I understand the need completely for this, so I get it.
And not to give you sticker shock on this $30 million estimate was from 2 years ago. I can almost guarantee you that by the time we build this in 2027, that's going to be 40 to 45 million. It's not going to be 30 million. It's going to go up between now and then. We had projected in 2 years ago when we made this estimate some inflationary projections, knowing it was out. But inflation has been higher than our projections. So. Supervisor Cook.
Supervisor Cook.
So with that point then, is there any rationale to move it up in the capital project? You know, if it's going to be another 15 million or, you know, does that?
Potentially, but I mean, you'd be looking at maybe 1 to 2 years moving it up. We really need to finish the government center project before we tackle the jail project. So you're not going to move it up before 25. So 26 would be the earliest. So really 1 year earlier, potentially. And when we get to the end and we'll talk about bonding, that's one of the scenarios that we'll talk about. Do we do 2 bonds, 1 bond? What projects are going to be included in that? So, all right. So who's in favor of a $45 million jail project? Yeah. Which way are you, Paul? Oh, okay. All righty.
I mean, I know it's necessary, I just.
Okay, let's hear. Moving on to emergency communications. Project 10025. $90,000 for audio log, audio recording system, and fiscal year 28. Price the audio recorder system that records 911 phone calls, non-emergency phone lines, and radio communication with the communication center radio network. This also will record metadata that is received for phone calls and radio channels. No questions? Okay.
Hey, Terry, how are you?
Good.
So have we looked at any type of cloud-based recording system that has some sort of AI that can encapsulate these calls rather than putting a new premise-based system in instead?
No, because we keep the information, if you will, on site. It's easier to control that way, and it's every 5 years I replace the server, but there's also interfaces with various other aspects of our records management system that we utilize as well, and we control it ourselves here rather than having it in the cloud.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Let's vote.
I voted on
You did?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Post-vote
question.
All right. Okay. 10089. 911 call center expansion for positions 8 and 9. 911 center positions expand to include positions 8 and 9, including console, furniture, computer, monitors, software systems, radio, and CAD and telephone.
I just have a quick clarification. Can you explain a little more what you mean by positions 8 and 9?
So currently, the 911 center has 6 positions in the center itself. We're looking at adding 2 more. There's actually two other positions, one in my tech's office and then one in my office. I can answer live 911 calls in my office as well. The current center has the wiring for two additional positions underneath the subfloor. To do this, we have to take a wall out to be ADA compliant to add these two additional positions, which is driving the cost up and moving my office to another area just across the hallway. So each position, the last I counted, was at $76,000 just for the hardware for the CAD, the 911 system, the radio, all of them adding up to approximately $76,000 per workstation itself. And that's not including the peripherals, the speakers, the monitors, because there's 6 speakers or 6 monitors at each position.
Talk a little bit about the training capacity.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. The current center, we're staffed with 6 people. We have 6 positions. I have no flexibility when we're at full staff with 6 people in there working during weather events like a snowstorm like on April 1st or a thunderstorm that comes that we're anticipating to be storm damage, whether it's wind or hail. I increase staffing to accommodate the emergency services out in the field to prevent any sort of an overload in the center. And when I have that, I can't expand my staff. When I'm at 6 staff, I cannot train an additional person. They have nowhere to sit. I have nowhere for the trainer to sit. They have to be tethered in next to them and work off of their same computer. So it's a lot more beneficial for a new person to have an actual position to sit by themselves and kind of have that trainer on their shoulder off next to the side of them on their own position. And it does provide for the growth, yes.
And the software and the computers that are part of these packages also, when there's a 911 call, you know the location of the caller on the enhanced 911, like if I'm out standing in my field, you know I'm out in my field, you know exactly where?
Yes, we do.
Is that right?
Okay, so if you're going to take out the ADA compliance, where are they going?
Taking out the wall to allow the be ADA compliant. If we,
Oh.
yeah, to accommodate that we are.
Good.
Yes.
I'm just going to go back to what we were on some of the other ones. Is as you take a look at this, how long does this accommodation for this change going to impact before with our current population growths again and things that that you see that this is till we're going to have to do this again?
So we're hoping this will carry us 15 to 20 years forward into the future. With adding the 2 positions right now, like I had indicated, we have everything wired in the subfloor for the 2 positions. With the expansion that we have to do, it'll allow for an additional 1, maybe 2 more positions into that area, that square footage that's in the center. So the hope is to make it 15 to 20 years.
And one of my final thoughts is these costs, I believe, are eligible for a portion to be in some of our reimbursement programs. I think 40% is, as far as from my history, that is favorable moving forward.
Are we ready for the green panels or red panels?
Next one is Project 10102 in fiscal year 25, network switches, microwave, and radio infrastructure.
Would Terry care to comment on this item and the next item at the same time?
So regarding 10102 for the network switches for the microwave and radio, these were put in place in 2016. As information technology can advise, every 7 to 8, 9 years, I believe they need to be replaced, all the network switches. We have 14 radio tower sites. All of these have these switches and such at each of the radio towers, and an estimate was obtained from our vendor to the cost of the replacement, and that's what they were indicating 2 years ago to be at $125,000. So by this time, they'll be outside of their life cycle for all these network switches for that infrastructure. The next item, the 10103 for the portable radio cache. In the communication center, we have a cache of portable radios for emergency responders to use. It can be used during larger events. If a deputy or officer is at the scene for 6-7 hours, their portable radio is going to die, the battery. There's been times when we've had resources from outside of our county, whether it be from Minnesota that operates on a different platform of communications, or other counties in Wisconsin that come into our county that don't have necessarily our channels that we have. We'll hand them a radio to use during that event. There's been times where we've had 16 to 20 of these radios that have been out in service on an incident itself. Current radios that we have, there's 12 of them that are within the last 3 years, and there's about 20 others that are 20 to 25 years old. They are end of life, not supported anymore. So I'm trying to purchase newer radios that are supported and are more up to date with what we have for technology out there.
So these could have been a green item, kind of necessary replacement. I remember when I was elected, the system had been so ignored for so many years that it was an emergency to replace the entire system. We don't want to get there.
Yeah, the green items I had are really very, very recurring. These are recurring, but they're over a longer cycle.
We can vote on 102 and 103 at the same time, I think.
Okay.
Next one is a new project. DC power battery replacement communication tower sites, replacement of the DC power batteries at the 14 tower sites. These are batteries providing backup power 48 volts to the equipment for emergency communications infrastructure.
So these DC power racks are at each tower site. They power the radios at each of the towers themselves. There's approximately 80 to 84 radios at the tower sites collectively. So think of them as a computer. When utility power drops before a generator kicks on, there's 10, 15 seconds of no power. It takes 2.5 to 3 minutes for these radios, if there's a lapse in power, to restart. That's 2.5 to 3 minutes that emergency responders more than likely are out during weather events when the utility power is interrupted. So there'd be dead zones out there for that. This provides the radios the power so they don't have to reboot during power fluctuations. The generators kick on. If a generator would fail, the DC power provides us 12 to 18 hours worth of emergency power until we can get the generator fixed or bring in a portable generator to power that site until we can fix that generator that's on site. And just to let you know, the batteries themselves, they're each 145 pounds apiece, and there'd be 112 batteries. So it's 8 tons worth of batteries that are being replaced. So there's a fee with recycling the ones that are currently there.
What is the lifespan of those batteries, and how old are those that are in there?
Yeah. So currently the ones were 2016 when they were installed, and the warranty themselves was 7 to 8 years. We've had a few that have expired their shelf life, while they've been in use, and we've had to replace some last year. And we're going through a monthly test of each of the batteries. There's 8 per site, making sure that they're at sustainable levels so they don't fail when we don't need it to fail.
Do you think it would be easier to rotate the replacement of the batteries annually rather than have a big shot like this?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can tell you the last year the price has gone up 30%. So they've gone up tremendously in price. And it's a 26 to 30 week wait time after you order the batteries. I do know that. Yes.
I guess I would agree with Supervisor Burning. I think the same as squad cars or other things, if we put these on a rotation, we know that we have to do these every 7 or 8 years anyway. If we start rotating them through, then we won't have this big increase every 7 years.
Going batteries. Go ahead.
I guess I would like to see, if we're going to spend 200,000 in 27, we're already seeing some failing batteries. Why don't we split this up into 3 chunks in 25, 26, and 27 and start the rotation?
Ryan, do you want to restate that, and then we can vote on that separately?
So if we split up 25, fiscal year 25, 26, and 27, if we did, what would that be, 70,000 each year? That would equal our same amount, correct?
Close.
Close enough.
Supervisor Adams.
So I would almost like to see us go ahead and start fresh and then have a rotation program with a fresh set of batteries. Because are we not going to have some that may continue to expire and then we're just having to monitor more batteries to be replaced as opposed to starting fresh and then allowing the department to come up with a rotation schedule? So I throw that out for what it's worth.
The other alternative that I might suggest to you is you do 40,000 per year starting in 24, and it's just 40,000, and then Terry will have to prioritize where the batteries need to be replaced, but just starting next year.
And then that way we're getting ahead of the 200,000, which is fine. So the last oldest battery will still be replaced by this 2027 preferential time. And then we are on that consistent rotation year after year where it does become like squad cars. I do like that idea.
Become a recurring item. Yeah, he's fine with it.
So what we'll be putting up our green paddles on is starting in 2024, 40,000 a year in a recurring cycle. Is that correct?
The next one is the Hammond Tower, $2 million in 27. Place Hammond Tower site is not owned by St. Croix County. The current contract expires in January of 2030 with the owner. $2 million is anticipated cost that should the county wish to build a new county communication owned tower, if there's no desire to pay monthly rent.
So what are we paying for the rent right now? what is it costing us also operationally on top of for maintenance? What is provided by them? And then further, what if we spend the 2 million on building this, what is our operational cost projected to be moving forward after that 2 million is spent? Okay, that was like 7 questions. Thanks, Terry.
So correct me if I'm wrong, what was it, 2011 when the sale? What year did the highway shop get sold? So 2019 for the sale of the Hammond Highway Shop, the tower itself was included in the sale. So at that time, there was an agreement until January of 2030 that the county could reside at that location for free. So right now, we don't have a monthly payment that we make it all to them. So at that location, we have a tower shelter that was put in brand new in 2016, a generator that was put in 2016 brand new. For that site, the yearly maintenance with the generator is approximately $590 some. Probably overall with the other maintenance, it's probably around $3,500 per year just on maintenance at that location. But again, we're still in control of the infrastructure for the shelter, the HVAC units on it. There's 2 of them. The generator, that's still under our control. After 2030, if we were to enter into an agreement with that current owner, they would be in control of that. I can't control what the maintenance is, how reliable the generator, how reliable the other items at that location would be. Would be a tenant at that point. If we were to consider, it's anticipated to be around $2 million to find a location to build a tower. It'd have to be approximately 250 to 300 feet to accommodate that location, to provide communications within the industrial park in the village of Hammond and the schools themselves. It was discovered when we were looking at building out the system that was critical to have a tower in that village for them 2 areas as well as the citizens of Hammond. So I come to you asking if you want to entertain a thought of building a new tower, having control of our own equipment, or if we become a tenant possibly at the end of the current agreement that's in place.
So 2030 is when this agreement expires.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have time to work out. I mean, is it possible that the current owner is benevolent to our county and extends that complementary occupancy for another couple decades?
Probably not that. But it gives us negotiation standing if we have an alternative. So if we have no other alternative, we just say, well, we need to continue our equipment on your tower. We'll pay whatever you want. Yeah. We don't have a lot of negotiating. But if we're willing to build our own tower, then we have more leverage in that negotiation. So why we're projecting it out in 2028 is that that would be, or 27, that would be the start of when we would need to start building, so it'd be done before that lease expired. But we will try to extend that lease before then. But that's where we're at. That's what we're trying to do. So we might not end up doing the project, but we could. Supervisor Shirley.
You partially answered my question, but if we move this from 27 to 28, does that give us enough time to potentially, if it expires in 2030, does that give us enough time to do that? Because realistically, we're not going to approach them for a new lease or anything in 2026 or 27 to figure out if we're going to do this in 27.
That's the good question, because it takes 1 year for an application for the NEPA study. In the last process, it was all of a year to get each site, 1 entire year before the feds would get back with an answer.
And it's January of 2030, so really think 2029. Supervisor Barcelo.
Is it impossible to buy it back? The tower?
No, not impossible, I guess.
I mean, what would the cost be, I guess, would be the next question.
Well, I'm guessing $2 million right now. Bob's not watching, huh? Any other great questions?
Yeah. First off, not understanding why we sold the tower in the first place, but just leave that one alone. But the age of the current tower and stuff, what's the life expectancy with till that tower would have to be replaced?
30 years, 50 years on a tower?
30 to 35 years life expectancy of the tower.
Why'd you sell that tower, Robbie?
I knew that. So when we went through the negotiations to sell the Hammond building, the prospective owner wanted the tower. He wanted to own the tower. He made that a condition of the sale. At the time, we also reached out to St. Croix Electric, who also was willing to partner us or investigate partnering on a joint tower. So there were other opportunities. So we built into the contract that if you want the tower, we had an extended lease so that we could decide what was in the county's best interest moving in the future. So that was how we got to this point. Thanks, Ken. But we have not spoken to St. Croix Electric since, but at the time there was, looking at partnerships and potential reduced costs.
How much money did we get for that highway building in Hammond?
I was going to say 2 million, but I think it was 1.8.
So with the age of the current tower and it has a 30-year life expectancy, how many years do we project that the current tower would still have a useful life cycle?
It's approaching the time, if we were to maintain that tower, we would have to have a structural analysis of that tower. It very well could go another 15 years without any issues whatsoever, but it's required to have them structural analysis done. Vote.
Next one, $40,000 in fiscal year '25. Radio console replacement, update and replace aging console radio station. The radio units are the radios that interface with the dispatch consoles, allowing them to change the channels to other resources as needed.
Terry, could you comment on this and the next item at the same time?
Sure. So the current, the radio consulate replacement, there's 3 radios that we received from Washington County after they were done with them. The 3 of them, think of it as a radio within a radio. The radio console can access each one, and there's 8 channels that they can access on there. This allows us to patch into the Minnesota Armor system for mutual aid events, whether they come over here or we go over there for public safety purposes, for law enforcement, for fire, and with EMS. Almost weekly it's used. There's 3 different radios for the different levels of mutual aid, and there's also a direct line to the National Weather Service in Chanhassen as well for that. They're approaching the 20 to 22-year-old status of them. They're not supported, they're end of life. So I figured it was time that we should look at replacing the 3 of them to make sure that they are sturdy enough to withstand what we're using them for each day. Questions at all on that one? No, there's antennas that are on the roof of the government center, or will be on the roof right now. They're in the ceiling downstairs. Any other questions on that? The next project, the 7260, the radio console upgrade. Last November, we conducted an upgrade of the hardware at each radio console. Again, it's a computer with peripherals and a media station that allows the speakers that they listen to both in their headset and on the shelf in front of them at each workstation. With the 6 stations, it was $110,000 to work through that. I broke that up into a 2-year project to get that done last November, and it's anticipated like any other computer that you need to replace it every 6 years, 7 years. So that's where I'm at dealing with that. Projected out in 2028. And they are proprietary licenses. That's why there's unfortunate the cost.
Quick question?
Yeah.
Do you need to bring any of that forward, or is your timeline for 28 sufficient?
I think I'm okay with 20. Like I said, it was last November and 22 that we took care of that. So 6 years should be a good timeline.
If there's no further questions, we'll vote on those two together. Thank you, Terry.
Let's see what we got. Covered that one. I think I'm up next.
All right. Take it from here.
All right, thank you, Chuck. We kind of threw Chuck right into the fire on these. A lot of these projects, you know, the staff have been talking about for years. And Chuck's had like a couple months to learn them, but yeah. Okay, so we're going to go to Parks, and we're looking at project 10075. So there's $675,000 out in the years 26 and 28. This is a multi-phased project. It's that Willow River to the State Loop. We're already working on the first phase. In the current 2023 or 2022 budget, the money is reserved in. We're working through that project. These would be the additional phases to that project. And this project, we would be looking at writing grants for to offset these costs. Any questions on the Loop Trail project? Yep. Supervisor Otino?
What kind of offset do you think you could get in a percentage basis? Because again, for me, this is just an absurd amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we were looking at 80% grants on both of those years. So $540,000 in grant each year. So our portion would be $135,000. A lot more reasonable when it's that dollar amount. Yeah. Yep. All right. Yep. Supervisor Burning.
Maintenance cost on these annually projected?
And safety.
Half an FTE, quarter of an FTE, one staff that's already on.
Well, I don't think the maintenance costs are very high initially. It's maintaining the trail in the long run. You know, the older it gets, the more maintenance it'll end up having. In the short run, I think it's fairly minimal. I don't think you guys do much to maintain the trail.
No, we do, we already have equipment to mow along trails for the loop trail, and we already have equipment to, you know, whatever else needs doing. There will be maintenance, but as far as safety, this is all, the whole entire trail is off-road. So there's not a safety issue. It has to be we're working with, these are federal grants, and they're through Highway Administration and Federal Highway, but also through State Highway. So they're completely built to state highway standards, and that's what is required. And these grants are very long-term with a federal project. This project's, the first phase has been going on for quite a while. We are bidding this fall, and hope that it comes in within our project budget, and if not, then we'll come back and talk to the board and see what they want to do. But that would be the next phase, and the next phase would all be the same way.
How many miles of bike trail do we currently have in St. Croix County that is somewhat or touched by St. Croix County?
We have the loop trail, which the whole thing is 4.7. The portion in Wisconsin is the, I want to say it's 3 approximately out of the 4.7, maybe it's a little less. And then we have the off-road loop, the Wildwood Trail, 7 mile, excuse me. And then we don't have really any other bike trails. We have routes that are identified on our county, not our county, but on highway system. Very little is on county highway, just very little, just places where we cross roads. Most of it is identified as low volume local roads, and we have that sign.
And then I missed, there was a meeting that I was supposed to attend and I had some work things come up. What does the future look like for number of miles of trail that is wanting to be put in both through the county and then through maybe some private ventures?
In the Somerset area, they've applied for TAP grants, and they're trying to push for connecting the loop trail all the way to New Richmond. And that there's a very active group, the St. Croix Bike and Pedestrian Coalition, and they're based out of the Stillwater area, but there's also organizations based out of Hudson. And there is, in the city of Hudson, there's off-road, there's, they're working, if you've biked in Hudson lately, you know there's actually quite an extensive number of routes in town here. And there are other organizations, there are groups out in the Woodville area that would really like to connect the Wildwood not only to Baldwin, but for school systems, to connect it up for kids' safe routes to school. So, and our bike ped plan is now about 6, 7 years old, but that identifies additional off-road routes. Not a lot. We've got areas where we'd recommend off-road, but this project here was one of the top priorities identified in the bike ped plan. You had a question, Paul?
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the grants, how competitive have we been? And if we don't get the amount of money we think we're going to get, did I hear you say that you'll come back to us to see if we can still do this?
No, what we do is if the bids come in too high, we come back to you. If we get the grants, we assume we can at least go forward with as much as it is in the KIP, that amount. We have already applied twice for phase 2 grants, and both times we've lost out. So I keep moving that project back a year because we lose that bit, we don't get those grants. They are very, very competitive. I do think that the next one, the next phase, the phase 2 one, is to go from Creek Blufflands to Willow River State Park and the new mountain bike area that they've identified. And most of that would be off-road, but there's a portion of it that would be on-road, on River Road, that's very low traffic volume. So there'd be striping and shoulder improvements, that kind of thing. So again, we push that project back until we get those 80% grants. Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Hanson?
It would have been great if you were at that meeting, because the tourism that the bicycle trails brings into the county is really enormous. And the trails are endorsed by state tourism and locally by the Hudson Tourism Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Bureau. This is really smiled upon by both economic development, who helped sponsor that, and by corporate sponsors and by the associations. So a lot of entities are very pleased with the way our parks have developed and the way our trails are projected to develop, because tourism brings a lot of money into our economy. And as we look at these projects and we say, whoa, that's a lot of money, I'd like you to please keep in mind that attendance at our parks over the last period of about 10 years since we began to rehabilitate our parks in about 2014 has gone up 100%, about 105%. And that does bring revenue to the county, but it also brings people to the county, and there's a multiplying effect that goes along with that. And it's really brought a lot of money and a lot of people to St. Croix County.
All right, so we have phases 2 and 3 of the loop trail construction. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, the next project on the list, 10076, is $1.68 million. It's the Glen Hills camping cabins with infrastructure. There'd be 9 cabins. So we have 2 cabins currently, very popular. We have to build some infrastructure in order to expand that area though, which is really where the price is for most of this. But there'd be 9 additional camper cabins. Questions on that project?
Ken, could we?
I just, not so much a question, but in 2025, since we're looking at the new possibility of a new transportation building in the town of Hudson and bonding on that, maybe it might be worthwhile to delay this project by a year or 2, just so that we have a better idea of how things will pan out in 2025. That's my suggestion.
So one of the things that we did with the plan was we looked at bonding in years 25 and 27 to split it up a little bit. But we took some of the bigger projects and rolled them into either 25 or 27 so that we're not doing a bonding every year. So spread the bonding out. You have a couple of different ideas that we could do with bonding. You could do one bond over this 5-year period. If you wanted to put it in the middle in 26, move the jail up, move the highway back, move these other projects to that year, or keep it into the 2 years, or split it up any number of different ways that you might want to do. But there's bond issuance costs, so in order to help reduce bond issuance cost, we do want to avoid bonding every year. A $1.68 million project, that's really pushing the limits of what I could cash flow. When you start getting that large, I really start looking at including that with one of the bonding years that we have. So I guess maybe we should have a talk about bonding. First of all, what philosophy you like on bonding, whether you like one bond and move everything to that year, or with the 2 bonding years that we currently have in 25 and 27. Because that would probably answer what we do with this project, and some of the others maybe.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it kind of comes down to wants and needs. And I see some needs in this list of the jail pod, the transportation building, and those are the things that I think we should be most concerned about in terms of putting together how that looks on bonding. I'm not really sure, but when it comes to the camping cabins and the campground entrance and the Eckert's Bluffland, those are worthwhile projects. I don't want to say anything against those projects. However, they're wants. And I think it would be responsible for us to consider delaying those projects so that we can make sure that we're addressing the true needs of the county and the citizens in terms of the transportation and the jail pod. So I'm not sure how that would work in terms of bonding, but I think those projects would be worthwhile delaying until we have a better idea. First of all, we got an $80 million project going on right now that we need to kind of wrap up, and then make sure that we have a good sense for what's going to happen with that transportation building, and also a better idea of the jail pod before we decide let's spend money on these other projects.
Yep. Those are the policy decisions that you guys have to make. Supervisor Adams?
So is there a way to have the director to rack and stack these items in what order she feels is the highest priority right now? For me, I think that would help me to have a better sense of what she needs to help our tourism and to help our client base.
We could move them all to 2024. That would be swell.
That would be greedy, though, but I wouldn't want to be greedy. So to answer Supervisor Adams' question, probably based on last fall, we did an online survey of all the Glen Hills Park campers for the last 3 years. And some of that information is in your packet. I'll just give you a couple highlights. We got a really great response rate on that. We got 31% response. Our campgrounds, our facilities, obviously it's mostly focused on campers. They gave us 4.6 out of 5 stars as for the quality of our services. We asked a few simple questions. What do you like most? Number one thing overwhelmingly, like 4 to 1, was my campsite, because people love camping at Glen Hills. It's a really beautiful facility. But also asked for land projects at Glen Hills, what would they say is the number one? And the projects except for hike-in camping is all listed in this thing. And the number one thing that they want is a new replacement of the 1970s structures, the entrance building, the separate shower structures, the old bathrooms, the pit toilets for men and women, not all the ones throughout the park, but the one at the entrance area. There's some great comments in there in your packet that people had to say. Things like, I've been camping here since I was a little girl, and I can attest that these things are exactly the same as they were 40 years ago, that kind of thing. Saying that really need to upgrade those. We already are seeing really high attendance. That was mentioned by Ken, but just to give you some numbers, our camping has, in the last 10 years, has increased also by over 100% at Glen Hills. So it's very, very popular, but there's capacity to have it be even more popular. Our new 14-unit group camp that can be rented out individually is going to really boost that and continue to boost our revenues. Our revenues, like you said, are up, like Dan said, are up over 100%. So highest priority for me has shifted a little bit to that project, which is what the public wants. And do we have a lot of public? I guess I would just argue a little bit that this isn't all want, it's also need. Glen Hills has been sold out over 50% of the weekends so far this summer. Homestead Parklands, we've had 4 weekends where people are waiting in line, and we have to have a person down at the entrance waiting to let one car leaves, one car goes in. One car leaves, one car goes in. Just to help put that in perspective, we've had days already this summer, we have about 70 parking spaces at Glen Hills, or at Homestead Parklands. We've had days where we've run over 200 cars through. 300 we've hit. That's a lot of people waiting to get in. If you were in the area on 4th of July weekend, you might have noticed that there were lines on Highway 12 for people trying to get into Willow River State Park, waiting in line to get in. We don't have the capacity we need in this county, our growing population, for the number of people who want to recreate and camp. We don't. The private sector can step up. We hope they do. But also people have a tendency to, for various reasons, depending on what they want, family-oriented, different focuses, they have a tendency to also want state and county parks. We had our grand opening for our new campground this June, and it was really interesting. 2 couples I talked to for quite a while grew up in Roberts, live in Roberts. The one gentleman said to me, I have never been to this campground. I only go to state campgrounds. And I am shocked. I wasn't expecting much. I thought, it's a county park. But I'm going to go because it's your grand opening. Who said he was blown out of the water. Glen Hills is pretty close to a state park. So I think that it's more than just want, it's need. And so the top facility would really be replacing those old structures, and that's in your list there. And then I think that it's also expanding capacity. And the order can be a variety of things, but I would say that adding the camper cabins after that, and then I really think that you should seriously give some real thought and talk to your neighbors and friends about how many people would like to see us develop Eckerd Blufflands so they have more places to go in this area. This is where the population is. That was mentioned a couple times by other department heads, that the population base is on this west end of the county, and this is where we need more facilities. So again, it is want, but it is also need. And the order of those projects, they're really the off-road bike trail, it's in the works, it's started, it's expected, it's popular. The replacement of the old facilities, probably the number one thing we need to get done, having listened to the residents and what they want and the campers. And then also continuing with expansion of camping, because that will continue to bring in more revenue at Glen Hills, camper cabins, and the RV park. And the RV park and the camper cabins, we charge more for. The new one, we would be able to because it's larger and a bigger facility. We're charging a little more already for the new sites because they have water hookup. And so that would bring in more revenue, help have a payback. And then the last thing, of course, is Eckert Blufflands. But again, I'd encourage you to talk to your neighbors and friends because I think you'd find that it's very much high on people's lists. Thank you.
All right, so the way I was looking at what she was saying, Supervisor Adams, would be the 920,000, you upgrade the 1970s Glen Hills Campground, move that one to 24, which would cut 870,000 out of that year, so that's kind of an offset. The 1.68 million for the camper cabins, that'd be the next priority, so if you left it that year, I would move the RV then back 1 year to 2026, and then I would move the Eckerts back 2 years to 2027. That's the big one that's going to be really require bond issue, especially. That gives us a little bit more planning time for that and matches it up with the bonding year we were looking at for the jail. So it spreads them out over more years and prioritizes them, but that would be the order. Supervisor Hanson, you'd had your hand up before. Did you want to go, or you want me to call on someone else? All right, Supervisor Shirley.
My question is on the 920 with the upgrade of the facilities. You know, we're talking about the interest station, flush restroom, shower. Is the plan to spend that money on one building, or is that multiple buildings in the entrance that all comprise one project?
Yeah, Ellen drew it on a napkin for me in my office, but I think it's multiple facilities all at the entrance there.
It would be one structure.
It's one structure.
Yeah, and the cost estimate, when we built the new entrance station at Homestead 2 years ago, it was $500,000. So they would be that plus what restroom, unisex restroom shower, like we built the building at, the other building at Glen Hills, which people leave the peninsula and drive over because the other ones are so inadequate and there's not enough for the number of people anymore. And then a couple other things we would need to do there is put in a sanitary system, the one we just put in at Glen Hills for the new campground and for future campground, that it'll serve both. That one was $100,000 because it had to meet commercial and pre-treatment standards. So kind of start adding that up, it's not too far off.
Supervisor Cook.
All right, I had some comments and then I do have a question. You know, in St. Croix County, we're really fortunate to have these natural resources that we have. And when we talked about our strategic plan previously, we highlighted the maintenance and enhancement of our natural resources as a priority. So I hope that we can continue to keep that in mind as we look at the projects. We've seen a lot of projects too here that we've looked at previously in the KIP that have, because of delay, they've increased cost. I'd really hate for us to see some of these continue to increase costs if we push them off. So I'm not sure about the idea of delaying some of the projects in general. And they are parks projects, but I know it's been mentioned a little bit about the sales tax that these folks come and bring to our county when they come and visit these locations. I mean, I really see these projects too as these are jobs projects. I mean, when folks come to these parks, many of them, the Glen Hills Park, you have to drive a little way to the side of the county to get there, but you are passing a lot of small restaurants, your small businesses that rely on folks coming to our county to. So I think thinking about it that way and thinking about the small businesses that are supported when we have great parks in this county is really important. And my question is, I have had a lot of people ask me about the Eckert Blufflands Park development. If we were to push that back to 2027 in the KIP, I know in the description it talks about 18 months of public input and meetings. Would we be able to start doing some of that community engagement work ahead of time, even if we push the overall project back to 2027, so we could get some of that work done and still, I mean, we're not doing a lot of capital investment there, but I would hate to start in 2027 if that were to happen and then not be able to do some of that planning.
That 18 months refers to what we already did. We have a master plan adopted by this county board for Eckert Blufflands. And we have been trying to find other funding sources for Eckert. We've applied for 2 other grants, significant ones, and we haven't been successful. But we've applied twice and we'll keep trying.
Okay, so it's not any additional planning, just the stuff that we already did for the 18 months?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Supervisor Hanson?
Sure, and I understand there needs to be, in order to, forgive me for stuttering a little bit, I'm exhausted. The give and take may be something that people need to consider, but I can see putting off the camper cabins for a couple of years in order to bring this Glen Hills entrance station up to 24. It's expensive, but it makes the jewel in our really, it is a beautiful place. And when you roll in now, what you see is basically a shack that you have to get out of your car and check in, and it's not ADA compliant. If you're in a wheelchair and you need to roll back to the ramp and get out of your van and roll over to the shack so you can check in, it's terribly inconvenient. It would cause you to not go there. If we have a really nice modern welcome station, the way they have at every other modern campground, it would be consistent with what we hope to put forward as our image as a modern campground. And I'd really just ask you to please approve this for 24. And I'm happy to agree to ask you to push this, the camper cabins, which I believe in, and they will cash flow, they will pay for themselves, but let's just push it back to 27 or 28 or take it off. But I really believe we need the Welcome Center.
Supervisor Otino?
2 things that come up in every conversation with residents of the county, and actually it's a couple more than 2 things. Taxes, 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 that's 3. And the other one is snow removal. Everybody wants, there's that much snow, that this paper plate, there's that much snow, and they want the snow removed. They want it removed now before they get up to go to work. I think we're to a point where I agree totally with Chairman Long. This is not a need, it's a want. And we have a state park, we have, it's a vast amount, just our county parks, and there's township parks. I just think we need to really look at this seriously, because not too long ago, this group was struggling to try to find money for public protection. We were struggling, we couldn't do it. And now you're talking, I was against that in the first place, the camper cabin idea. I will die before this ever starts to turn around and pay for itself. I just, the bike paths, the parks right now, we've got enough of, and we need to look at the taxes that we're asking our constituents to come forward with, because it never goes down. Thank you.
Supervisor Adams?
Could you restate your plan that you stated on how to move stuff around, please?
Yeah, listening to Community Development Director Denzer, what I was hearing was the biggest priority is the 1970s Glen Hills camper, or Glen Hills entrance station for $920,000. That's the one that was recommended to move up to next year, to 2024. Replace the old aging infrastructure. Anything from 1970s is getting pretty old. So that's what my wife tells me. And then the Glen Hills, if you want to spread them out over years, look at it as a priority, 1 project per year. The camper cabins were 2, so leave that in the current year. The next one down on the list was the Eckert Bluffland Park development. I would push that 2 years to 2027, because that's the next bonding year. And then the 24 site RV campground for $1.89 million, push that back 1 year. That puts 1 big project in every year, but it's giving you the priority order for them.
If I could ask the director, Just a quick rationale for why the camper cabins are higher in the priority than the 24 RV sites. And I'm speaking as an RV trailer owner also. Full disclosure.
I'm not saying they necessarily are, they just cost more money. So I was trying to look at it that way. But I do think, excuse me, I do think that that is a very good project because they would be located in some of the handouts we provided you. They would be located right across from the new group area that can also be rented out individually. They would be designed very, very similar. All of those are designed for the larger 50-foot or greater RVs. And so these would all be for that, plus more pull-through sites, plus, yes, they'd be really, really popular. And then there would also be, at that point, we already sized the new sanitary system for a restroom shower structure right there. And so that it would be flush, which would then really, that immediately increases people's popularity. And they would have just water hookup, keep the cost down, which doesn't add that much, and that would increase the popularity and increase the length of the stays. People are willing to stay longer if they have that convenient. And we already built the dump station as part of this project, so that already means two of the support things are done. So yeah, that could be a smarter move. I don't profess to have analyzed between those two.
I did ask the Parks Administrator which one he thought would be more profitable, and the return on investment of the camper cabins over the RV. Not everyone has RVs. Everyone can stay in a camper, though, or a cabin. And to Supervisor Tino's point, he's right. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, $1.68 million for 9 camper cabins. The return on investment is beyond both his and my life expectancy. So, I mean, we don't do these projects because we're going to make a whole bunch of money on it. You do these projects to stimulate the economy, as Supervisor Hanson was talking about. You do it as amenities for the people that live in this area. And that's why you do it. And that's purely a policy decision that you guys need to make. Supervisor Ortino?
Some of this expenditure might make more sense to me if we could use this 12 months a year. But I don't know too many people that do camp in the December, November, January, March. This is a very small period of time that we're looking at spending an enormous amount of money on. Thank you.
Supervisor Shirley?
My question comes with the camper cabins and the RV campgrounds. I know we just disapproved a zoning change that would have had a private one in Somerset. I know of another one that was trying to go through that didn't happen. Are there, I guess I'd ask Alan if there's been other ones that the department have talked about that we don't know of private entities trying to create campsites.
I know of one that they've come to us, met with us, and we're just waiting for them to submit a proposal. So the other, excuse me, the other one that we know of is the ski place, the golf course that would like to add downhill skiing, and that option still is on the table. They have not come back. They have not submitted any applications. Sanitary is a big issue I believe, for that size of operation. The other one, which is in Somerset, I don't think sanitary would be as big of an issue, except they don't have a very large site. So we're not talking a lot of camping locations with that one. They're talking about enhancing a fairly small site with camping. So,
Supervisor Barkalow?
I think Supervisor Shirley made a great point that we just turned down a current operation who has been in operation for a very long time in this county, and to turn around and burden the taxpayers with a very large bill over whatever 15, 20 years or whatever this is going to be. I think this is totally in the wrong for us to do this.
And I agree with Otino, Barkalow, Long. We honestly, once upon a time, camping was an outdoor sport where you went and got bugs and all the stuff, and now we want to turn it into a hotel. What the heck? I mean, we have to make that decision to let the campers take some responsibility for this funding part of it too. If you want these kinds of things, figure out ways to grow it. Don't put it on the county to grow this. I just think it's sad. And the cappers thing, the hideaway, unfortunate. We turned that down, and that's a completely functional place that's up and ready. And we said, nope, sorry, not you. I don't like this at all. Thanks.
Supervisor Leaf.
So of this, you probably said it before, but I apologize. Of these amounts, how much of it were we counting on getting some grant money for? And what would be the estimate? Because these totals aren't, that's the whole project cost, but we were looking for grants, correct?
Yeah, some of these are not grant eligible. Basically, the camping ones are not grant eligible. The replacement of the entrance station, we did have projected $200,000 for a DNR grant. That would be something we'd have to write. We don't have that secured yet. But the camping ones, no grants associated with them. Those are the full dollar amounts.
Okay, thanks. And one other thing I wanted to comment on, kind of piggy off of what Supervisor Cook was saying. I was out this weekend knocking doors of constituents, and universally they were talking about parks and how much they enjoy to recreate and our natural and utilize our natural resources here. So I think I know it's a high dollar items here, but I really think, as you mentioned, Ken, that it entices people to live here and come here and spend money here. So I know we have other needs and wants, but I agree that it's part of our strategic plan, and I think we need to be true to that.
I think we have, if we could, I think we have a little bit of difference between some of the projects, and maybe if we take them a little bit out of order here. But I'm thinking that the entrance station, replacing an existing facility that we have from 1970, is different than expansion of some of the camping facilities. So maybe if we could take a look at that one first, that $920,000, and if I could get your input on that project first to see where it is. And my big question on that one is, does it make sense to move that up to 2024, considering we had eliminated 870 of other projects earlier? So the dollar amount for the year stays about the same. So that's the first one that I want to tackle. Supervisor Anderson?
I want to ask the director how likely it is we get that grant that we're proposing for that.
DNR grant on entrance station.
I believe it would be very likely. They replace complete replacement. They support grants for replacement of aging facilities very well. So yeah, the 200,000 is the max they'll go usually, but that would be very likely to be funded.
So that being the case, I would support moving this to 24, providing we get at least 100,000 in grants.
Okay. All right. Supervisor Hanson?
I think it's important to say here that, and I don't want to get bogged down in a debate. The situation with the campground in Star Prairie was a response to the petition by the neighbors who didn't want the noise. It wasn't saying whether or not that the owner could have camping. It was a response to the petition by the neighbors who were exercising their right according to state statute to petition and express their concern over the brand new facility that was going in, and they were there first. That's what happened. It wasn't the county board saying that we didn't want the facility to go in because the owner wanted it. It was respecting the rights of the property owners around who had already been zoned the way that they were zoned. And again, I don't want to get bogged down in a debate. I just want to point out what the facts of the situation were. We have no neighbors who will complain about the campground in Glen Hills, and there are no parties going on until 2 in the morning with loud music there. So it's not exactly comparing apples to apples, although I do have empathy and real empathy for the owner of the property in Star Prairie. So
if there's no more discussion on that item, well, there is, I guess. Supervisor Counter and then Supervisor Shirley.
Yes, first, one of the things that we talked about in one of the in our meeting for community development, also for Eckert Bluffland, was, and Attorney Amos Heather was going to check. I don't know if you had an opportunity to check yet, if we were to do a joint exercise similar to what they did up at the Freedom Park in New Richmond with the military, if the county would be able to accept a military operation to help with the development of the park with an integrated readiness training program. Because the program up there has saved them in excess of millions of dollars on that project. What it did, it took local contractors that overseen the military development of that park, and all of the military received exceptional training from exceptional contractors that helped them and gave them a lot better training than they would get at Fort McCoy or other places. And then as an end result, there's this very functional building that is left for the people of the community to use. And in a case like this, where we have engineering units in Hammond, New Richmond has used a whole brigade worth of military, giving them access to over 3,000 soldiers for doing that project. These things can work, but the question is legally, I don't know if you've been able to check into that or not.
Just briefly looked into it for, public works projects. If the labor is free and all the county is paying for is materials, then that could be a possibility. And I think if that would like to have further discussion, it would be something that could be on the agenda for the Community Development Committee to look into that further. But yes, I do believe it's possible.
Just a quick question for Supervisor Counter. Do you think the military units and the local contractors that assisted them would be willing to do something like this in future years as a training exercise?
From talking with the soldiers up in New Richmond, their experience has been exceptional. This has been a great training opportunity for them. They've got skill levels that go far beyond what they would normally get on training, because they're being trained at state code levels and things that these soldiers really respect these contractors that are helping them through. There is a cost for bringing the contractors in, but it's minuscule compared to the overall cost of the labor. And their training exercises for them, they've had nothing but, it's been a win-win for everybody that's been involved with this. It's been exceptional. And
Thank
yes, they would. There's a process, and we would, to do something like this, we would have to start now, even if we wanted to look at 2026, 2027, because there's that much time just to get everything on the go and to get the process rolling, because it's went as far as to the Pentagon for that one to get the approval.
Supervisor Shirley?
I agree with Supervisor Counter. I really like that idea. I think putting it on 24 is going to be a really constrained budget anyway. If we move it there, we're going to have an issue. If we move it to 25, 26, does it give us enough time to go down that route? Maybe, but that also gives us more time to find a grant or two to help us with that as well. So I don't necessarily think that we should move it to 24, maybe even keep it where it is.
All right, so I think Supervisor Counter was talking about the Eckert, right? Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Supervisor
I was
Shirley
talking
was
about
referring to the entrance station.
I was talking about the entrance stations.
Yeah. All right. So different. So Supervisor Counter was a little bit, he was on a different project than what we had originally started the conversation on. But, all right. So my question for you is $920,000 in 2024 to replace the 1970s entrance station for Glen Hills. Okay, thank you. It was 11 to 5. Yep. All right. So my next question then is on the camper cabins. They're currently sitting in the year 2025. That was the second priority. So is 2025 still fine for the camper cabins? Any further discussion on that?
I'd like to see it move to 2028.
Is that just Supervisor Zartino? Anyone else like that idea?
I think it's worthwhile delaying it past 25.
I'd like to see it in 25.
So I think what we're doing here is we're reaching a nice compromise by moving ahead with the new entrance station in 24 in Glen Hills. Then in the others, let's delay those more till we have a little better chance for how we can fund them.
I agree. I agree. It was the attitude that I took in the beginning. We have to trade something to get that entrance station was the way I started that conversation. And with, I agree with you, Cara, but this is the horse trading that needs to happen. Let's put them back in good faith. What year do you want to move them to?
I would just suggest moving the camping cabins and the RV campground to 26, and then put, as Ken had suggested, the Eckers Bluff land in 27 for now. It puts it off enough for us to reconsider the cost and the funding.
All right.
Weren't you doing the Eckert Bluff land at 26, not 27?
27. That was a bonding year.
Well, I'm talking about 125.
Yes.
Yeah, 125, Chair Long was suggesting move to fiscal year 27.
27.
All right. All right, so we're going to do a 3-project deal here. We're going to move the camper cabins back 1 year to 26, the 1.68 million. We're going to move the same RV, 24 site RV back 1 year, the 1.89 million. And the 16.5, we're going to move back 2 years for Eckert to fiscal year 27. So 2 projects go back 1 year, 1 project moves back 2 years.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, we can vote.
Okay. So just to recap where we're at with all those projects, I got one more little one in there, but just to recap where we're at. So in 2024, we're going to replace the entrance station of Glen Hills, $920,000. There are no projects in 2025. There are 2 projects now in 2026. It's both the camping ones, both the RV and the camper cabins. And then the Eckerd Bluff land was pushed out to fiscal year 2027. All right. The last one on there was project 10098. It's $50,000 out in your fiscal year 27, and it's the Apple Lake boat landing replacement. And so those have a life expectancy. This is when it's projected that we would need to replace that in $50,000. Used to be called Squaw Lake. All right. Okay. So that wraps up the spending part of the program. Yeah, yep.
So going back to the campsites that were denied, we had some facts that were, I believe, misstated, and I'd like to just make sure that this is recorded, that we correct this. The neighbors' petition, were we statutorily obligated to accept what they said and make the motion to deny? Were we statutorily obligated to deny that based on their petition?
So this is getting fairly off topic.
But this was stated
Yes, I know.
on topic, and I want to make sure that this is clear so that it's not in the minutes and wrong.
I can send an email to all the county board supervisors explaining that, because it may be something that can be addressed at the next county board meeting, so
Okay.
I will send a separate email to everyone.
Okay, thank you. That's what I'd like cleared up. Thank you.
Right. So when we look at funding, if you look at the very bottom here, we have beginning of year funding balance of $7.3 million. That $7 million came from our ARPA dollars, the lost revenue that we can claim under ARPA. That's where that money came from. So we have a fairly healthy starting balance. So we're going to be able to cash flow at least this year and potentially part of 2025. The big project, though, that's in 2025 is the highway facility. So that's at $7.4 million. That's going to be too large to cash flow. Right now, that's the only big project sitting in that year. So that would be the only thing that I would ask for a bond issue for. So we'd be looking at the end of 2024 coming to you, given that it stays in the 25 year after we go through this process next year, we'd be looking at an authorizing resolution at the end of 2024 to cover that Hudson Highway shop replacement for the $7.4 million. And so that would be the bond issue that we would end up doing in 2025. Looking out then, 2026 is a little heavy on projects that may or may not end up being restructured over the next few years. But 2027 is the next heavy year then. We have both the Eckerd Bluff lands in that year, and we have the jail expansion in that year. So you're looking at, $45 to $60 million worth of projects within that year. So that would be the next year that we'd be doing a bond issue. And the jail project, it's really just like the government center project. It's a matter of time. You will do a jail expansion in St. Croix County at some point in time. It's just a matter of when you do it, but it will occur. So if that sounds like a plan, I will make all of these modifications. We will resubmit that then in the form of a resolution to the admin committee. You will see it in September at the county board, and then we will ask for a final vote on how this package looks.
With that, we've completed our business items. Ken, thank you very much, and Chuck, thank you very much. You did a great job for your first set of presentations. We really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for very thoughtful questions today. We've covered a lot of ground today. I thought very, very good questions. Next item of business is request for future agenda items. Seeing none, we'll go to announcements and correspondence. Again, seeing none. Our next, Ken, could you suggest when our next COTW would be?
Yeah, probably early October, when we'll take a look at the 2024 County Administrator's recommended budget. And I will get it to you just as soon as I possibly can. Thank you, Ken. But I don't have all my numbers yet. I have no idea what the budget's going to look like.
Okay, so sometime in the first probably 10 days of October, we'll have a COTW. Are there any other thoughts real quickly? With that, we're adjourned at 11:23. Thank you.